Welcome, chess friends, to this introduction to my new Chessable course that I co-authored with Bf5 called Annihilate the Alekhine 4-pawns attack for white. So within less than an hour, you will have an answer against this opening. It's an opening that's only played in 2% of the games, but my personal experience was that I often got better positions with white. But then my center would be undermined, I would lose control, and I would lose the game in the end. So this course is meant as a weapon against the Alekhine, and it's also meant for you to keep control over the game and avoid losing control over the center. In total, there are 25 variations. Then there are 15 tactics and critical moves to reinforce the themes of the variations, 5 model games, and an introduction. And in the introduction, there is one chapter, Taming Houdini, that focuses on how to keep control over the center. An important inspiration for this course was the Coffee House Repertoire by Grandmaster Graham Jones. Excellent book, and he writes about the 4-pawns attack. White takes possession of the center and tries to deprive black of any squares. If we are successful, then black will be stuck with an extremely passive position and will be squashed. We also play against black's knight on b6. It may have taken 3 tempos to get there, but it's still not particularly on a happy square. With the knight so far away, black's kingside is also vulnerable to a quick attack down the h-file. Black will try to contest our central control, and we have to be accurate to keep our center together. So also Graham Jones emphasizes that the control of the center is key for white. So let's go to Lichess and let me show you, right? Because you know my courses are designed for club players. And the variations that you're going to learn first are the ones that you're most likely to get. So here you see the Lichess Games database, and I selected Rapid and Classical 1600 to 2500. So that's the basis for prioritizing the lines and selecting the lines. So let's go through it. E4, knight f6. So there are 3.7 million games in total with the Alekhine. And we are going to focus in this video on key variations with bishop f5, and in the next video I will come back on the key variations without bishop f5 and early deviations. And here we have, you could say, the signature position of the 4-pawns attack with pawns on f4, e5, d4, and c4. And as you can see, the knight went from g8 to f6 to d5 to b6, and white has control over the center, and black has only developed one piece on b6. So in this position, right, you can see in 65% of the cases d takes e5 is being played. We continue through this line. Knight c6 attacks the pawn on d4. And just as a first example, how critical moves of the chapter Tactics and Critical Moves, how they support the variations. So this is one of the critical positions because we want you to play here bishop e3 and not knight f3, allowing bishop g4. So bishop e3 to defend the pawn on d4 and not allowing the pin with bishop g4 of the knight. Then, in most of the cases, black plays bishop f5, And now we have to be prepared to meet knight b4, threatening an attack here. So we prefer to play knight c3 here. And in general, we will see that we play knight c3 after bishop f5. That's the most common move. So we can counter knight b4 with the move rook c1. e6, knight f3, and now you can see there are multiple moves. So bishop e7, bishop g4, bishop b4, queen d7, and they will be covered. Let's start with the main line, bishop e7. After bishop e7, right, there's a very solid alternative, bishop e2, but we go for the aggressive d5, only played in 15% of the games, and now we are under less than 1,000 games. So we started with 200,000, so you could say this is happening in less than 1 in 200 games, 0.5%. And of course, starting from the 4-pawns attack. So black is more accustomed to face bishop e2 and not this aggressive move. And we are going to see that. You can see it scores extremely well for white, 59% wins for a total of expected score of 62%. Black takes, take back, the knight on c6 is under attack, knight b4, threatening knight c2. We play knight d4, defending c2 and attacking the bishop on f5. And now you can see in 50% of the cases, bishop g6 is being played. After bishop g6, black is immediately lost because we play bishop b5, and after king f8, we castle short with the threat of knight e6. And the first tactic that we have, so we had one critical position, the first tactic is just to reinforce this idea of knight e6, that you recognize it immediately from the position, that after knight d5 we play knight e6 and we win the queen. So this is the first line if we follow the most commonly played moves by white. So now we're going to back up in the tree and say what else is possible. So after knight d4, we were attacking the bishop on f5 and defending c2. And in 40% of the cases, bishop d7 is being played. So that's the best move. We continue aggressively with e6. F takes e6, d takes e6, attacking the bishop on d7. The bishop goes to c6. And now we follow the recommendation of Graham Jones and play a3. And you can see a3 is only played in 25% of the games. And we were starting with 200,000 games. We were under 1,000. And because we selected d5, and now we have, again, a move that's not commonly played, a3, and we're down to 41 games only of the 200,000. And this is a very challenging move for black to face. And it gets quite sharp. Bishop h4, g3, bishop takes h1, a takes b4. The bishop on h4 is under attack, goes away, and we play queen and g4 with the idea of castling long. Right, so if we continue here, we get to this position, and just to show, right, how spicy this position is. Of course, white is threatening a discovered attack. It would be logical, for instance, to block that with the knight. I mean, we don't have enough games here to just really see what black is going to play, but after knight d5, bishop c4, knight takes e3, we have e7, and this is winning for white. So this is, of course, a very sharp line. If we just go back a little bit further, right? So after a3, you can see here, bishop h4 is being played in 56% of the cases, but knight d5 is also often played. So let's go to that move, knight d5. We play bishop d3 with a big threat of queen h5, right? So you can say, oh, I lost my bishop. Yes, but this leads immediately to a mate. So we are down to, like we said, after a3, right? We were down to 41 games. And it's a very sharp position. And I think what we said in the beginning, that there is an information asymmetry, that Black knows the opening better. After you've studied this course, you will know it better than Black, and you will be able to crush your opponent in this opening. So let's go further back in the tree. So we looked, right, at the variation. Just to go back, right, I think it's if you, so we were in this position, and here we played bishop e7. And then we played our move d5. So let's go back, bishop e7. We play our move d5. And then there is, of course, a second move. We saw that if Black captures, we take back and then knight b4, but imagine that Black plays immediately knight b4. Played in 25% of the cases, so it can happen. We now play rook c1, and it's important to play rook c1 and not knight d4, because after knight d4, Black has a potential to play c5 later, and we don't want that to happen. And now after e takes d5, we have this move a3, and Black has trouble completing their development, and white is much better. So we back up again, and we are going to look at knight f3. So we saw bishop e7, right? And then d5 with knight b4 immediately, rook c1. And we saw d5, 70% of the cases, e takes d5, knight b4, and then knight d4, with two very spicy variations. Let's now go to the second alternative, bishop g4. So, of course, the idea is to trade a defender of the pawn on d4, and at the same time, of course, the bishop on f1 is defending c4. So it's not possible to take back with the bishop on f3, and it's not possible to take back with the queen on f3 because of knight takes d4. So the idea of Black is to damage the pawn structure of white in front of their king. But we just take back with the g-pawn. It looks ugly, but it is no issue. But here it is critical, right? Black has a major threat, and that is to castle long, and then there's a pin over the d file, and also the pawn on d4 is then 3 times under attack by the rook on d8, the knight on c6, and the queen on f4. So we have to counter that idea with c5. So this is one of the moves, right, that you see back in the critical moves, because it's very important here to play that move, right? And if I go back here, right, it's only played in 44% of the cases, but you have to be able to play that in 100% of your games and not have any doubt. So after Queen f4, c5 is critical. And now there are two moves, knight d7 and the other one is knight d5. Let me focus on the 63%. Knight d7. And now, historically, you can see that the most played moves here are queen c1 and queen d2. And that's actually the move that Graham Jones recommends. And that's about +1. But then when we were analyzing this with the latest engines, and in this case specifically Lila Chess 0, Lila Chess 0 was stating that after castle, white is completely crushing black in the attack. And so, right, so if you look at what's going to happen, queen a4, and with an extremely strong attack. So the idea, of course, here is to continue with defend the pawn, and then bishop b5, b4, and the attack of white is much stronger than the counterattack by black on the king side. So white will come first, and Lila Chess 0 gives this already as +3 after queen a4. So a very strong advantage. So that is the move bishop g4. And we saw that after bishop g4, we allowed our pawn structure to be damaged, played bishop f2. Then we had the critical move c5. And then we had the novelty, you could call it a bit of a novelty, to castle short. So let's go back to this position. So we covered bishop e7. Bishop e7 with this aggressive move d5. Knight b4, rook c1, or take, and then knight b4, knight d4. We covered bishop g4, the second alternative, where we just played bishop e2, take on f3, take on f3, queen h4, bishop f2, queen f4, c5, critical move, and after knight d7, castle short, and queen a4. So let's go to the next alternative, 21%, which is bishop b4. So in this case, bishop e2, we just developed, knight a4. So now the pawn on c4 is under a double attack twice. And again, we have to defend this pawn, and we do it with this move, c5, again a critical position to reiterate that this is the only move that solves the problem for white, and to get rid of the pressure. And here it's easy for black to go wrong, right? So we have two tactics associated with this position, knight d5, and now the bishop is trapped and white is winning, right? So if we go back to c5, right, you can see, okay, knight d5, it's only played in 9% of the cases, but immediately black can resign. The other one is if the knight comes to c4, right? That's another tactic. We take. We now of course, our bishop is under attack. So we play bishop g5, queen d7, and now we trap the knight on c4, and white is immediately winning. So this is a very, you could say, dangerous position for black, and black has to know what they're doing. So there's only one move for black to continue, taking on c3. Now the knight goes to d5, attacking this bishop. The bishop goes back to d2, threatening a discovered attack with c4, attacking the knight on d5, and the knight on a5, knight goes back, queen e1, and white is +2, has a much better position, and this queen can go to g3 later, and we can start an attack here on the king side, or we can push our pawns also, if we want to, in the center. So white is much better. Okay, so that leaves us in this position. Just to reiterate, we had bishop e7 with the move d5, with the main line e takes d5, e takes d5, knight b4, knight d4. We had the move bishop g4, followed by bishop e2, take, queen h4, bishop f2, queen f4, c5, critical move, knight d7, castle, followed by queen a4 with a winning attack against black. And then we looked at bishop b4, and after just development, bishop e2, castle, castle, knight a5, we played c5, and we also got a better position. So let's now look at the last alternative, only played in 8% of the games. Queen d7, preparing to castle 1. So we just continue our development. So let's look here, f6, 42%, and the bishop g4, 37%, f6, d5, critical, threatening to take on c6. And you can see there are not too many games left, right? So knight takes e5 is the most played move here. Right? We take, and after f takes e5, right? You could perhaps ask yourself, like, what is the problem actually here? As why is black not taking on d5, right? Because you can see that the most played move here is a4, but isn't this pawn just hanging? Well, that's not the case, right? Because after a move like e takes d5, we play rook takes f5 followed by bishop g4, and we win the queen. So, and this is a recurring theme, right? If we just back up a little bit, we go to, let's say, f6, d5, and now e takes d5 is being played. We play bishop takes b6, a takes b6, c takes d5, and now we get into the same tactic. So just to come back to the main line, f6, of course, we said we're going to play here d5 again. And yeah, you saw actually how it continued. And here we can just play a4, and we have the better position. So that was the move. Bishop, queen to d7. Queen to d7, yes. So we were here, and we discussed bishop e7 followed by d5. We discussed bishop g4 followed by bishop e2. Bishop takes f3, g takes f3, queen h4, bishop f2, queen f4, c5. We looked at the move bishop b4, and we played also there bishop e2, castle, castle, knight a5, c5, right? You can see the themes, how we maintain control. And with a strong attack, and you saw as the last one, queen d7, bishop e2, and then and also there we played at the right moment d5, and we had this tactic of taking the bishop on f5 followed by bishop g4. So we're going further up in the tree. And we have one more move to cover. There are different moments where, of course, the opponent can play bishop f5. So here, knight c6, of course, was the main move. And then we play bishop e3. But if black just changes the move order and plays bishop f5 immediately, many times, of course, this will transpose after knight c6, bishop e3, right? This would be a transposition. But imagine that black says, I don't want to transpose, I play e6. Now we play knight f3 because we're no longer afraid for bishop g4. That would be a loss of tempo. Bishop b4. And now white plays bishop d3. Does not commit yet the bishop on c1 because perhaps it doesn't want to go to e3 but to g5 or another square. We don't know what the best square is yet. And we trade the black bishop on d3, and black is now losing control over the center in general. Of course, the idea of black here, you can see, is to play, in 50% of the cases, c5, and this would be to undermine, of course, this center of white. But we just castle, c takes d4, and now knight e4, and black is winning after knight c6, c5, and white is +4. So this was the case where black says, I'm going to postpone knight c6 to play an early c5. And you can see we traded the white squared bishop of black on f5. Black was losing stability because that's a very important piece for black in this whole setup. And black got their thematic c5 in, but in this case we just castled, played knight e4, and then you can see what is going on here. We have knight d6, but also again you can see that those three pieces are too much, right? We are threatening to take on b6, but we're also threatening to trap the bishop on b4. So this is an earlier bishop f5. So normally a knight c6, bishop f3, bishop f5, knight c3. In this case, it was bishop f5 immediately. Again, we don't play bishop e3 or knight f3, but we play this move, knight c3 after bishop f5. And after e6, knight f3, bishop b4, because this would be again a transposition to the old line. So bishop b4 would be something new with the idea of this c5. We trade this central piece of black. And then we are getting this very strong attack with a well-timed c5 after black has taken on d4. And we're either winning a piece on b6 or trapping the bishop on b4. So let's go back up in the tree. F takes e5. So after f4, so of course this is the beginning, d takes e5. There's one more, right? So we can go here, right? If black does not take here, bishop f5 is also possible. So we had bishop f5 after, let's say, take, knight c6, and then bishop f5. We had take, bishop f5, and here we have bishop f5 before taking on e5. Again, knight c3, consistent in all the lines, first knight e3, right? And of course, there's a big possibility of transposition if black decides to take on. Then we get into the line we just discussed. So let's assume that they play e6, right? Because if I go back here, knight c, you can see here e6 is played in 40% of the games. So if they want to do, right, the other moves are, this 50% is leading to transposition. So e6 is something new. Knight f3. And then bishop e7 again. If white is able to exchange the light-squared bishop, black loses a lot of control over the position. We saw that in the previous line. The same applies here. So bishop d3, queen takes d3. What is most played here? Castle. And now we have a novelty which is h4, right? So if you think about the whole situation, h4 only played in 7% of the games. So 85% of the games sees natural development, but h4, and suddenly black is in big trouble. So knight g5 is coming, threatening mate on h7, and you see that black has lost control over the position because they lost their bishop on f5, and black has been unsuccessful to really pressure the white center, right? So if you just, as an example, knight c6, g6, and just h5, right? It's this is the trainable, and this is where it ends, and white is +2. Can even be worse, right? Knight c6 is still a natural development move, but after h6, knight g5, black can resign. So again, you can see how strong this attack is. So that concludes the key variations with bishop f5. In the next video, I will cover the key variations without bishop f5 and the early deviations. Thank you for watching, and I hope you are enjoying the course.